Let's talk about where you're from. You're from Fort Worth, Texas, 76104. I read an article that says 76104 has the lowest life expectancy of any zip code in Texas.
Wow. Wow.
So I want to know
that.
That's why I got the card and I get to ask a question. But in all honesty, what was it like for you growing up in Fort Worth?
There was a liquor store around the corner. There were prostitutes at this pool shack right across the street that we went to go play pool in. We didn't have a lot of adult supervision in the summertime, so it was a lot of hide and go get it. You know what I'm saying? A lot of inappropriate ways of trying to learn love. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you didn't get it the right way.
Right.
So there were a lot of barriers, and then there was church. So you got this smorgasbord of experiences that are now clashing. And so it could be very difficult, And then, when you're raised in these marginalized communities, a lot of single home families, the mama not happy that she's single and working two jobs, so she mad and mean. So, you also raised around a lot of mean and mad parents.
Right.
The adults always seem, don't you remember that when you were young? Everybody seemed mean and mad.
Right.
Everybody was mean and mad. So you develop that energy, so you never feel like that you're wanted. You always feel like you're in the way.
Right. Help me out with this. You were adopted. Was it your biological aunt, or was it a family friend that you referred to as your aunt at the age of 4?
She was. I don't believe she was biologically related to me, but that's what because other people call her Aunt Gertie.
Yes.
That it just became natural for people to think she was my aunt.
Right.
But she was a lady.
Right.
That legally adopted me. She took me in because she knew of my biological mother.
Right.
Legally changed my name. I was born Kirk Mathis, and she changed my name to Kirk Franklin when I was 4.
Right.
And she was a widow.
Do you remember this transition in your life?
No, there's never a time in my life that I didn't know that I wasn't adopted.
Right.
I've always known that I was adopted.
Right.
So when I came on the planet and never had any level of consciousness, I knew from that day that I was always adopted.
Did you know your biological mom?
And I think that's the trauma. The trauma is in most environments when kids are adopted, they're in these systems.
Right.
So they don't know who their biological parents are. They know that they are given away, which is already a wound.
Right.
But then another family takes them in, so at least the womb gets a scab.
Gets to heal.
Yeah. But in these marginalized communities, it ain't nothing for your biological mama. Ain't it something to come through, but they new boyfriend, to pull up and maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Right. So every time they come and leave, it's ripping that off. So you never get a chance to heal. So you're always living with these open wounds.
So you knew who your mom was.
Oh God, yes.
So when she would come around, was there any kind of interaction with you? Did you mom, did she take you did you try to get your mom to take you to the store, buy candy, buy cookies, buy pop, or was there any interaction with her and you?
There were moments where maybe, she would tell me to go get a hamburger, or maybe there were moments, that she would bring a soda around the house or whatever. But for the most part, she would make promises and wouldn't keep them.
Right.
It's because I got a half sister. She had a daughter, and so sometimes she wasn't raised with me. But when she was around me, there were times that we would wait for her to come pick us up, and she didn't.
Right.
She'd make promises, take us to the fair, and so. I remember, living with a lot of broken promises.
How did help me understand, and maybe you don't even know the answer to this. How did the woman, Aunt Gertie, that ended up adopting you, how did this come to be? Were her and your mom friends, or how did that happen?
My mother was the niece. My mother was the daughter of somebody that she knew. I don't know if they're related or not, but my mother's mother died. And when my mother's mother died, Aunt Gertie kind of played a bigger role in Deborah's life. Deborah's my biological mother.
Right.
And so when Deborah got pregnant with me, she didn't want to be a mother. She was 15,
right,
something like that. She didn't want to raise the child. And so she allowed Gertrude to adopt me.
Right.
And so that's how they knew each other. They knew each other through somebody that was related to somebody.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's how I got to And Gertie.
Have you ever been able to heal? Have you gotten therapy for that trauma? Because you know that Aunt Gertie is not your biological mom.
Yeah.
You see your biological mom from time to time.
Yeah.
And the connection is not there. Aunt Gertie gave you something your biological mother either couldn't or wouldn't give you at the time, which is love.
Yeah.
Now, love in our community back then meant something different. It wasn't hugging and kissing. You got a roof over your head, you got clothes, you got food. That's love.
That's love.
But Aunt Gertie gave you something that your biological mom either couldn't or didn't.
Yeah.
How has that shaped you into the person, the man that you are today?
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this recent situation of me finding the same thing about my father this year.
I was going to go there.
I hadn't talked to my mother in over 23 years before this situation.
Your biological mother?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gertrude died 33 years ago.
Okay.
So Gertrude died when I was 20.
Okay.
Yeah. I found Gertrude in her bed asleep. I found Gertrude. Well, the fireman found her in her bed at night sleep, and she transitioned. Yeah. And so Deborah and I had not had a relationship, because what started to happen with Deborah and even the man all my life I thought was my father, and because I met him when I was 6, and then see him again till I was 13, and then see him again until my career took off. And then Deborah and Dwight, the man who I thought was my biological father, they started showing up at concerts. And that pissed me off.
Right.
It really angered me. And so I
wanted nothing to do with me when I didn't have. Now I have, you want everything to do with me.
Back then, you didn't want me. You know what I'm saying? Mike, who's it? Mike Jones?
Yeah.
Mike who?
You didn't know me.
Who? Who? Yeah, so, it was very painful for me.
Okay.
And so up until this year, I hadn't talked to Deborah I haven't talked to Deborah in over 23 years.
So how did the conversation come to be that Dwight wasn't your biological father?
At a funeral this year that was had at a church, there's a young lady that sings in my group whose daddy was a pastor at that church.
Okay.
The funeral was for a lady who is my aunt. She's the sister of Deborah.
Okay.
I didn't go to the funeral because I knew Deborah would be there, so I didn't go.
Okay.
At the funeral, and I'm telling you everything I was told, at the funeral, there was a guy there who was close friends to the pastor. That guy's name is Rick. Rick went to the funeral because the lady that died was a member of that church.
Correct.
When Deborah, my biological mother, was at the funeral as well, it was said that Rick said to the pastor, "Oh, I didn't know that Deborah and the young lady that died, that they were sisters." And then he goes on to say, "I used to mess around with Deborah when I was a kid."
He said that in the church?
He said it.
Oh, did they talk? Whoa.
You ain't been to black church in a while, have you?
Yeah, but they don't normally share secrets like that.
Yeah. You need to start coming on back to black.
No, I better not go back there. They might share some of my secrets. I ain't going up in there.
So yes, he said that at this funeral. And so when he said that, no,
you're good, bro.
And at that funeral, when he said that, everybody looks at him and says, "You know that's Kirk Franklin's biological mother." And he's like, "Oh, no." And they were like, "Do you know Kirk Franklin?" He was like, "Yeah, I've heard the name. And so now they're looking at him. His height, his ears, his hands.
Eat his beard.
A little bit more.
All right, right there. Right.
Yeah. So he now is being observed by everybody.
Uh-oh.
And so now the rumor mill starts to happen. And so it gets to Deborah's attention that this church and this community is now talking. Deborah finds my number. I have a Google number. And Deborah finds that Google number from somebody, leaves a message. I hadn't heard her voice in 23 years, traumatized by her voice. She said, "Hey, this is Deborah. I want you to know that I hear about the rumor that's being spread around. Rick is not your father. You know who your father was. He died. And I'm not going to let that be a lie that they tell you. Mr. Rick, because of the commotion on his own, he gets swabbed and gives the swabs to my friend that sings with me and said, hey, everybody's running their mouth. I don't know. I do know that I did date her. I do know y'all are looking at me crazy right now. Here, give these to Kirk. If Kirk got any questions, he can go get these tested, if he has questions. Well, of course I can sit on that.
Yeah, see, I know you. He knew. Because he probably inquisitive himself, knowing that you gonna be inquisitive, you got to do it. You just got to, don't you? You couldn't sleep at night not knowing.
Yeah, so as I got swabbed, and
he's your dad.
He's my father. Shook my world. It has shaken my world. Even now, I'm still shooketh. I'm still in the middle of the impact of that car wreck. And Deborah still denies it. And we took another DNA test for her, and she still denies it to this very day. I have not talked to her since.
It's funny though. To this day, you still refer to her as Deborah, not Mom. No. You refer to Rick as Rick.
Mr. Rick. I call him Mr. Rick. It's because he's a good guy.
Right.
He didn't know.
Right.
So it's not on him.
Right.
But what people need to understand is because, one thing that has been very hard for me, and I'll be honest with you, Mr. Shannon, it is very hard for me when people come up and go, oh, this is so beautiful. This is a beautiful thing. You are united with your father. It's beautiful. I need for people to understand. I'm 53 years old. I wasn't looking for a daddy.
Right.
He wasn't looking for a son.
Right.
Do you know how much deconstructing it takes to live your whole life knowing who you believe your daddy to be and you hated him? And so now that you get this information, you just don't go, oh, well, let me turn that off. Right. Hi, Dad.
Right.
It's like, just because you're introduced to love doesn't mean that you know how to receive it.
Right.
Especially when you have lived a lie and people don't even understand also the power a mother has over a child. The fact that my mama ain't been in my life but still denying me that truth, that impacts the way that I can embrace and still even move through this process.
Do you think she knew that Mr. Rick was your father instead of Dwight?
I'm gonna tell you something. I'm gonna keep it a buck with you, King. If we're not gonna even start the cap, I was looking at everybody crazy. Because it's a small community.
Right.
Ain't nobody know. And the man that I thought was my father, his family, know Mr. Rick.
But just because they know of Kirk, that don't mean that they knew that Mr. Rick had some type of relationship.
That exactly is true. That exactly is true. I'm saying, though, when you grow up in these spaces of not knowing what's what, you start to look at everybody like crazy because the bottom line is the baby got dropped.
Yeah.
The baby got dropped.
So in other words, you're like, I'm 53 years of age. I wasn't looking for a father. He wasn't looking for a son. Because when I was looking for a father, he wasn't looking for a son.
Yes.
And so now it is
it's not that it's too late. I am just having to deconstruct everything. And
how do you undo 50 plus years though, Kirk?
Say what?
How do you undo 53 plus years?
It's hell. It's hell. It's hell. My therapist bill is out the wall.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I could probably buy a whole new children's wardrobe for what's happening with my therapy bill. But I do want to say though, Mr. Rick is a good guy. He's a good dude. He's a good dude. And what I love the most about him, he keeps saying, go at your pace. He said, it's all about you. And I'm in therapy and I'm walking it out and I'm trying to process it. And, I'll be honest with you, it breaks my heart that my mama still ain't called me through this. It breaks my heart, bro. Documentaries come out. I ain't even heard from my mama. And it's amazing the impact mamas have on
That's the heal. That's the wound that has to heal.
Yeah.
Not Mr. Rick.
Yeah.
Not Mr. Dwight that's passed.
Yeah.
That's the wound.
Yeah.
That the salve needs to be spread on so it can heal.
Yeah.
Have you thought about having a conversation? Have you thought about having therapy with your mom? Because I think you guys, there's some things that you need to hear from her. There's some things she needs to hear from you, but it needs to be in a controlled setting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maybe someday, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm okay to say I don't know. I'm okay to say that I don't have the answers. I don't know.
Have you thought about opening the door first? Because I think deep down, Kurt, I think you're wanting her to take that step. Because she was the adult. She did what she did. She gave you away because at a young age, you say she was about 15.
15.
That's asking an awful lot for a 15-year-old to take the responsibility, because a 15-year-old can barely take care of themselves, let alone another body.
Yeah.
I think, Kurt, you would get so much more if you took that first step, if you opened that door.
You know, there's a great fear too of opening up that door, because you don't know. The unknown.
We fear what we don't know.
Yeah, and the fact that there were 2 tests that she denies.
Kurt, you have to understand, when someone is told a lie for so long.
Yeah.
She told you this lie for 50 plus years.
Yeah.
You think that after
Fair.
You could.
Fair.
I mean, people will tell you a lie tomorrow, and they'll keep telling that lie because they believe repetition of a lie will make it the truth.
Fair.
So when are there at any point when you're alone and you're sitting at home that you're like, you know what, I need to do this? It's because it's not for her. At this point in time, nothing you do is for her. It's for you.
I think that when I'm alone right now, what I sit with is because the truth is, this happened when I was working on the album.
Yes.
And then the album came out, and then the tour. So I've been blessed to be busy.
Right.
And so now that the tour just ended last week, I'm having to sit in a little bit more than I've had to. So when I'm sitting now by myself, I think it's also more of, ain't this some, you know, I can't believe this has really happened. I think the reality of what has happened is hitting me more now than ever before, because I was blessed to stay busy. Because if I wasn't busy, I probably would have lost it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I probably would have lost it.
Do you believe that she started to come back around along with the person you believe to be your biological father? They wanted something? They found out what you had become, who you had become?
Back years ago?
Yes.
When Deborah... That's how it made me feel. It's because she was not in my life.
Right.
Even when I was homeless, sleeping in my car and didn't have food as a young 19, 20-year-old man, nobody was around. Nobody was looking out for me.
Right.
Nobody checked on me. And so when...
Did she know where you were at that age?
It's Fort Worth, Texas. I'm not hard to find. And I was living in the house that Gertie died in.
Okay.
So I'm where everybody know I'm at. You know, I'm playing at the same churches. So I'm not hard to find. But you know what, though? And at the same time, I do want to say this, man. This is not about bashing a black woman. I don't want it to even come across like I'm on your show and there's a vengeance that I have for what my mother did. We don't know what she went through.
Right.
We don't know the pains in life that she had. We don't even know maybe what all the things she suppressed. I don't know.
Right.
All I know is that for me in my life, it's been turned upside down. It's been, like, I'll give you something that I even started to struggle with too, man. Like, can I keep it up?
Keep it a buck.
I've even had my struggles with God. I've had my private struggles with God. Because I am a Christian that believes in the sovereignty of God. Means that I believe that everything God allows or God creates. That nothing passes to us that doesn't go through God's hands first. That God can either stop things or God allows things for a greater reason. I humbly believe in that. That's my humble biblical view of the sovereignty of God. So God and his sovereign plan allowed me to be raised without my daddy. And my daddy lived 10 minutes from me the majority of my life. Not having a daddy, we know what the stats say. The stats will say a young child raised with his father and mother has a better chance of survival.
Absolutely.
We all know the stats, right?
Yes.
So not having a child and not having a father, I got into a lot of trouble. Learned a lot of inappropriate ways of survival with women and sexuality and different things, and made a lot of mistakes, you know, to develop a lot of bad habits. Now, mind you, Mr. Rick was a kid himself.
Right.
He was a kid himself, but I didn't have a dad. God, in His sovereign plan, allowed that to stay away. In that, I developed some bad ways without having a male figure in my life, a mother figure, male figure in my life. And some of those ways, when I became a Christian, now God calls those things sin.
Mm-hmm.
But in His plan, He kept some things away that could have helped some things not turn into these bad sins that I struggle with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now there are things in me that God don't like, but also the things that He allowed.
He helped create.
So I've had my own private, and this is the first time I've ever said this publicly. I've never said this before. And me and God have had struggle. And somebody would say, well, you don't know what kind of man Mr. Rick was. You know, he could have been a bad influence. You don't know what kind of man Mr. Rick could have been if he had a response, if he would have had
a responsibility of having a son.
Because me and you as men know, them kids grow you up.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that you gotta now,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
We don't know. And I'm not saying that I know. I'm just being transparent to say I've privately struggled. I've had my war. Like, I'm quite sure everybody listening to me, if you've never had anything, you are like, God, why you take my mama? God, why you do this?
Of course.
If you've never had a war with God, you ain't never had no relationship with God.
Right.
Because if you got a relationship with God, you've had some wars with it.
Of course, there have been questions.
Yes, sir.
Dude, man, that's to know that private struggle. But at the time as you were growing up, you're for this transition, and so now you're 10, now you're 15, you're 20. Did any of that, was that going through your mind at the time that my dad's not here, my mom, whatever reason she was, but I do have Miss Gertrude, our Gertrude, that's doing the best that she can. She was 64-year-old. She was a widow.
And by the time I'm 13, she's 73. She is a 73-year-old woman by the time I'm 13 years old.
With a 13-year-old.
She can't do nothing. She can't do nothing with me.
Right. She sleep at 6:30, you out the house.
Listen, listen, right after Price is Right. You remember Price is Right?
I do.
Yes, sir.
I do.